The applause roared around him like thunder. He stood at the podium, basking in the glory, smiling for the cameras, as if he'd built the company from scratch, rescued it from ruin. I stood just out of frame, clipboard in hand, invisible to the cameras, but not to the truth. He wasn't the one who saved the company. I was. When the numbers nosedived, it was my plan that kept us afloat. When his mistress tried leaking confidential files to a rival firm, I was the one who found out and shut it down. And still, here he was, my husband, accepting the award as if I'd merely warmed his seat. I thought he'd thank me. He didn't. Behind every great man, he quipped, is a tireless support system. The room laughed. My heart cracked. I didn't want applause, but I didn't deserve to be erased. And I wouldn't forget this moment. That night, he poured wine like nothing had happened. Great turnout today, huh? He said, loosening his tie. You really know how to handle logistics. Logistics. That's what he called saving his empire. I stared at him from across the marble counter, wondering how love could rot so quietly. He had once been warm. Now, everything about him was cold calculation. And when his phone buzzed with a message from her, I saw it. You looked amazing today. Proud of you. She was still in the picture, still lurking behind every boardroom door and midnight meeting. Was that Angela? I asked. He paused. She just congratulated me. You should tell her to keep her congratulations private, I replied, voice flat. He smiled without remorse. She's harmless. No, she wasn't. She had tried to ruin everything I built, and the only reason he didn't fall with her was because I had caught him. I had nearly lost everything covering up their mess. Angela, his so-called creative partner, had tried selling confidential data to a competitor under the guise of a consulting deal. I caught it the night before the documents were due. Had I not flagged it and stepped in with a quiet pivot plan, the board would have eaten him alive. He never even knew the full extent. Just smiled when the crisis evaporated and chalked it up to good luck. I watched him praise her ideas during meetings, make room for her in projects, all while pushing me out of the spotlight I earned. And because I loved him, or thought I did, I kept quiet. I let the narrative twist, but silence can become suffocating. And by the time I realized he didn't resent the chaos, he resented me for ending it, it was too late. He hated that I didn't let him burn. Weeks later, after yet another board meeting where my voice was ignored, I walked out early. He followed me to the elevator. You can't keep doing this, he hissed. Doing what? Undermining me. I laughed softly. I saved you. He leaned in. And you made me look weak. That was it. The truth. It wasn't that I'd overstepped. It was that I'd succeeded where he failed. And for a man like him, my competence was betrayal. That night, I stared at the ceiling for hours, wondering how many times I had confused disrespect for stress, dismissal for distraction. When had I stopped being his partner and become his shadow? The next morning, I put in for an extended leave, telling HR I needed time. I left quietly, no press, no tears, just space. But what I didn't expect, what I couldn't imagine, was that I'd be waking up in the past. I opened my eyes and everything was off. The alarm tone, the smell of coffee, the flicker of sunlight across the duvet. My phone buzzed, March 3rd. My calendar still had the notation, prepare Q1 emergency brief. I sat up fast. This was the week I saved him. The week Angela tried to destroy him. I stumbled to the mirror. My face was the same, but everything felt different. I wasn't dreaming. I was back, reborn, given a chance to choose differently, to protect myself, not him, to stop saving someone who didn't want to be saved, just preserved for applause. I smiled slowly, Last time, I protected the company. This time, I would protect me. And if they wanted to fall, I'd let them. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't cry. I'd just move the safety net out from under them and watch, calmly, as they hit the ground they earned. The first thing I did was retrieve every piece of strategy I'd written for the recovery plan and store it under a new cloud account, private, secure, encrypted. Then I dug into Angela's communication history with outside vendors. She'd already begun seeding lies, offering access to back-end reports in exchange for future partnerships. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I documented everything, time-stamped it all, and sent it to a trusted contact on the legal team, off record. I didn't need to play hero this time. I just needed to prepare the consequences. Meanwhile, I smiled through meetings, brought him his coffee, and let him think I was still that version of me, the supportive, soft-spoken fixer he thought he could always fall back on. But inside, I was building a wall between us brick by brick. I wouldn't stop him from crashing. I would make sure the fall was legal, clean, and public. He invited Angela to the strategy dinner again. She's got a good eye for PR, he said. I stared at him over my wine glass. I thought that was my job. You're more operations now, he replied smoothly. Besides, she's hungry. Reminds me of you. I smiled at that, cold and sharp. Then she'd better be careful. Hunger has consequences when it turns to greed. He blinked, confused. I changed the subject. But I knew exactly what I was doing. Angela was walking into the same fire I once extinguished. Only this time, I wouldn't douse it. I'd fan the flames. And when they both realized I wasn't coming to save them again, it would be too late. Let him hate me for saying no. Let her scramble for scraps. I didn't need their destruction to feel powerful. I just needed my own dignity. And I was finally ready to reclaim it. Over the next few days, I started rewriting everything they thought they controlled. I shifted vendor contracts, updated project authorizations, and registered all strategic documents under my solo consultant LLC, something I had secretly set up in the last timeline, but never used. Not this time. I updated contacts, removed their access to key tools, and replaced every verbal agreement with documented trails. Slowly, cleanly, I removed their fingerprints. And when he asked why things felt disjointed, I said simply, just trying to make things more efficient. He smiled like I was still helping. He didn't know I was helping myself. Angela continued to posture in meetings, but I could already see the board growing wary. They'd trusted her once. But when you stare long enough, even charm starts to crack. And I was about to show them every fracture without ever raising my voice. One night, after a late meeting, I stood alone in the empty boardroom and looked out at the skyline. I remembered how I had once begged him to credit my work, to see me not just as his wife, but as his equal. He had looked at me like I was greedy, ungrateful. But now, I wasn't asking. I wasn't hoping. I was preparing. Angela would try her stun again soon. He'd let her. And when they did, I wouldn't shield them. I would simply hand the board the truth and step back. Let the truth hit where it may. They used my love as leverage. They mistook my silence for weakness. Now, they'd see what happens when the woman who once saved them chooses not to. Angela made her move earlier this time. Maybe she sensed I wasn't as pliant as before. Maybe she thought she had to act faster to secure her grip on him. Either way, she approached one of our junior analysts, trying to convince him to bypass reporting protocols. "It'll be faster this way," she whispered, hand on his arm. What she didn't realize was that I had already warned the analyst days ago, under the guise of a training conversation. Document everything, I'd said, even if they say it's off the record. So when she offered to help him get ahead, he reported it to me privately and nervously. I thanked him with a smile, then passed it straight to legal. I didn't need to confront her. I just needed her to keep digging. Every lie she told now had a timestamp. Every manipulation, a paper trail. And I was archiving it all. By Thursday, the board had started asking questions. Why is Angela listed as the lead on Project Frost? One member emailed. Wasn't that your initiative? I responded with a short, professional message. I'll be addressing the ownership and contribution breakdown during Monday's compliance meeting. Thank you for flagging. That was all I said. No defense, no emotion, but it was enough to rattle the cage. That evening, my husband came home tense. What's this about you taking credit for my project? He asked. I turned to him slowly. Your project? His jaw tightened. Angela's been leading it. She's been redirecting credit. The board knows it. So do you. She's a key part of the team. She's a saboteur. I snapped, finally letting my voice cut through. And I'm done protecting you from her fallout. For the first time in months, he looked uncertain, maybe even afraid. Good. Let him feel it. Angela cornered me in the office lounge the next day. What game are you playing? She hissed. I took a slow sip of my tea. You're the one bluffing with counterfeit cards. You think they'll believe you over me? She sneered. I don't think. I replied. I know, because I kept every receipt while you were too busy playing queen. She froze. I leaned closer, voice calm and surgical. You should have learned from the first time, Angela. But you're too greedy to notice when someone stops protecting you. Her lips parted as if to fire back. But I walked away. I didn't need to argue. I'd already uploaded the final report to the board's portal. Everything she touched now was toxic. And when they reviewed the logs Monday morning, her name would light up like a red flag. I had tried to be quiet before. This time, I was precise. Over the weekend, I finalized my own proposal, a sleek, future-forward expansion plan that would carry the company into a new market. It had nothing to do with him, nothing to do with her. It was mine, crafted under a shell company I'd formed years ago and never needed, until now. On Monday, I walked into the compliance review dressed in steel gray silk and certainty. The board filed in, curious and tight-lipped. I presented my findings, time-stamped documents, matching project timelines, voice memos from late-night meetings where I had laid out the original strategy. Then I slid across a final envelope. Angela's email trail, including the vendor bribery scheme she thought no one saw. Gasps. The head of compliance cleared his throat. And where is Mr. Delaney in all this? Complicit, I said calmly, but unaware of the full scope. He relied on someone unqualified to do what I had always done in silence. The fallout was swift. Angela was suspended pending further investigation. Her access revoked. Her name stripped from every project she touched. My husband tried to save face, pretending to be blindsided. But the board wasn't buying it. You told us she was a rising star, one executive said. You vouched for her judgment. He turned to me, almost pleading. You should have told me. I met his eyes without flinching. I did. You just didn't listen. That night, he came home defeated. Why didn't you stop this sooner? He asked. I turned off the kitchen light and looked at him with the cold clarity of someone who'd been burned once too often. Because last time I saved you, you resented me for it. This time, I let you feel the cost. He stared at me, stunned. You let me fall. No, I said. You jumped. I just stepped aside. His anger came in waves. One moment, begging for forgiveness. The next, lashing out. You're just trying to make me look weak, he snapped. I don't need your help anymore. I raised an eyebrow. Good, because you'll never get it again. That silence between us, once filled with cautious hope, turned to ash. The company didn't fire him. Not yet. but they stripped him of leadership authority and put him on probationary oversight. Meanwhile, they quietly offered me a promotion, not because I demanded it, because I had earned it 10 times over. "You've always been the strategist," the chairwoman said. "We just didn't see it until now." I nodded politely, but inside, I didn't feel victorious. I felt released. I didn't want his crown. I wanted my name back. And now that I had it, I wouldn't let anyone, man, mistress, or board, erase it again. He sent me flowers, a handwritten note. "We were a great team once. Can we try again?" I smiled as I read it, not out of hope, but amusement. He still thought I wanted what we had. He hadn't realized yet that I had outgrown it completely. I didn't reply. I didn't rage. I simply returned to work, where my name now headlined press releases, not his. Angela's public apology went viral for all the wrong reasons. I didn't mean to hurt anyone, she cried on camera. The comments shredded her. "You got caught, not sorry." She was never the brains, just the shadow. The truth had a long tail, and it finally caught her. She had been handed my success once, and she dropped it like glass. I didn't need to lift a finger. Karma had my old blueprints, and it executed them with absolute precision. My office looked different now. It wasn't just the view or the upgraded furniture. It was the weight of it, the space I occupied, not because I was allowed to, but because I had taken it back. I filled the room with quiet strength. Clean lines, fresh flowers, a wall of names, women in leadership I'd personally mentored since my return. I wasn't just climbing anymore. I was pulling others up, and that more than any promotion felt like vindication. Damon used to say, "Success changes people." He was right. It changed me, but not into something cruel, into something clear. Before, I begged to be seen. Now, I let my work do the talking, and no one dared question it. I wasn't just known, I was respected, and respect built on silence, sacrifice, and proof. That kind of legacy doesn't crumble. That kind, it survives the fire and becomes the flame. I launched my own initiative 2 months later, a consultancy for female founders. "You don't need permission to build," the tagline read, and it hit harder than I expected. Applications poured in. Testimonials followed. My inbox was full of women saying, "They tried to erase me too." It was more than business now, it was purpose. Damon watched from a distance. He liked every post, sent emojis on anniversaries, little attempts to crawl back into a space he used to dominate. But I never answered, because I wasn't trying to win anymore. I had already won, not because I crushed him, but because I stopped needing to carry him. My success no longer had his name on it, and every room that once dismissed me now invited me to speak, not as someone who survived scandal, but as the strategist who outlasted the storm and rewrote the forecast. One afternoon, I saw him in the building lobby. He approached hesitantly, eyes uncertain. "You look different," he said. "Lighter." "That's what happens," I replied, "when you stop dragging dead weight." He flinched. "I never meant to hurt you." I stared at him for a long second. "But you did. And then you blamed me for fixing it." He looked away. "I wasn't ready to need you." "You didn't need me," I corrected. "You needed someone to clean up your mess and stay quiet. And that's not partnership. That's convenience." He opened his mouth, but no defense came. I smiled softly. "I'm not angry anymore, Damon. But I'm not yours either." Then I walked away, not because I wanted him to watch me go, but because I no longer cared if he did. My exit wasn't for drama. It was for peace. Angela left the country not long after. Word was she tried launching a podcast about resilience. It flopped. No one wants advice from someone who built their brand on betrayal. I didn't follow her downfall. I didn't retweet the mockery or revel in the headlines. I simply made sure every opportunity she once had now had a better name on it, mine. Not out of pettiness, out of precision. Because when you know how they move, you know how to counter it with grace. One investor who'd once ignored my emails now asked to speak at my event. I smiled and said yes, but gave the keynote to one of my protégés instead. That was the new power, not needing the stage, but controlling who stood on it. I wasn't just moving on. I was multiplying. And the version of me who once fought for credit now gave it freely to those who earned it. The board held a private dinner one evening, honoring the quiet architect of the company's stability. This time, I was seated in the middle, not on the edge, not near him, when the chairwoman raised her glass and said, "To the woman who didn't just rebuild this company, but realigned its soul." I didn't smile out of pride. I smiled out of peace. Damon wasn't there. They said he'd declined the invitation. I knew better. He couldn't face a room that no longer applauded him. He had always needed noise. I had learned to thrive in silence. The same silence that once erased me had now become my crown. And no matter how loud they once were, no one could ever turn down the volume on my presence again. After the dinner, I took the long way home. I walked past our old apartment, the one where I used to wait for him to come home from late meetings. The curtains were open. New tenants, new furniture, but the memory still floated behind the glass. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel regret. I felt release. That girl who waited in silence, hoping to be appreciated, was gone. I whispered to her, "We made it." Because we did. We walked through fire and didn't come out bitter. We came out gold. Damon had once told me, "You're too good at fixing things." He was right. I fixed me. And now, I wasn't interested in patching up broken men. I was too busy building unbreakable women. Lucas, one of my advisors, had been there since the restructuring. Quiet, sharp, respectful. He never hovered, never presumed, just showed up when it mattered. One night, after a panel, we sat across from each other at a quiet bar. "You don't talk much about the past," he said. "Because it doesn't deserve the airtime," I replied. He smiled. "You're not like anyone I've worked with." "Is that a compliment?" I asked. "That's a warning," he said, "that if you ever decide to let someone close again, they better come correct." I laughed. For once, not guarded, not polite, just real. I didn't know what we were yet. But I knew this. I wasn't choosing anyone who made me shrink again. And Lucas? He never once asked me to. At the 5-year anniversary of my consultancy, we held a celebration. Not for me, but for the women we'd funded, mentored, and launched. One of them stood on stage and said, "I thought I needed to be rescued. But your story showed me I just needed to take the pen back." The room fell silent, then erupted into applause. I stood in the back, hand over heart, because that was it. That was the story. Damon thought I saved his company. Angela thought she stole my legacy. But the truth, I reclaimed myself. And then I used that freedom to make sure no one else had to start from zero again. The 6th year marked a full-circle moment. I was invited to judge the same startup showcase where Damon once stole the spotlight. Back then, I'd sat quietly in the audience while he stood on stage, presenting my ideas as if they were his own. But now, I held the clipboard. My name was on the banner. And the organizers? They addressed me as Ms. Monroe, our keynote and legacy sponsor. Damon wasn't in the lineup. He wasn't even in the room. I spotted a young woman on stage, nervous, brilliant, trembling with potential, and I smiled. That used to be me. And now, I was the gatekeeper, not the one begging to be let in. I didn't need revenge. I just needed moments like this, where I got to open doors instead of kicking them down. That was the reward, not just reclaiming space, but owning the map. I ran into an old colleague at the showcase after-party. She had once defended Damon, said I was overreacting when I called out the imbalance. "I owe you an apology," she said now, holding her drink like a white flag. I didn't see it then, but I see it now. I nodded. We're all taught not to look too closely at certain things. She laughed softly. You didn't just prove him wrong. You proved a lot of us wrong. I didn't do it to prove anything, I replied. I did it to stop disappearing. She clinked my glass and smiled. Well, now no one could ignore you even if they tried. And that, I realized, was the quiet revolution I had built. Not fame, not fear, just a presence so earned, so undeniable, that even the ones who doubted me now had to admit the truth. I never needed saving. I needed space. Lucas walked me home from that event, as he often did now. We didn't define what we were. We didn't rush to label the closeness between us. But it was real, and it was consistent. Does it ever get easier? He asked. After something like that, I knew what he meant. The betrayal, the exile, the silence. Not easier, I said, but quieter, like a wound that turns into a scar. It stops bleeding, but it never forgets. He looked at me with something like admiration, something heavier than attraction. I like your scars, he said. They tell better stories than perfection ever could. I didn't answer. I just reached for his hand. Not to be rescued, not to be healed, just to be understood. That was new for me, and more valuable than anything they had ever tried to steal. Months passed. I expanded into new markets. My face appeared in magazines, but not as a scorned wife or scandal survivor. Just as me, Claire Monroe, founder, visionary, builder. I was asked to write a book. I hesitated. Did the world need another woman explaining how she rebuilt her life after betrayal? But when I asked my team, they all said the same thing. It's not about him. It's about her, who you became. So I wrote it, not to rehash the pain, but to trace the arc, to show the moments where I chose to rise instead of stay silent. It sold modestly at first, then virally. The title? The Second Save. How I chose myself over everything I once protected. And the message was clear. You are not obligated to fix the people who break you. Sometimes the real rescue is walking away and never turning back. One night, I received a package with no return address. Inside, a copy of my book, annotated, underlined phrases, scribbled notes, and on the last page, a single sentence written in familiar handwriting. You saved me. I'm sorry I hated you for it. I folded the page once, then twice. I didn't cry. I didn't call. I placed it in a drawer and left it there. Because Damon's apology, though long overdue, didn't change the ending. I hadn't built this empire on remorse. I'd built it on refusal, on the choice to no longer protect someone who never protected me. I didn't need to forgive him out loud. I just needed to keep living in a way that made it clear I'd already moved on. The page was folded, the story closed, and the future already outlined in bolder, sharper ink. A podcast invited me to speak about leadership and legacy. The host asked, "What's the difference between revenge and rebirth?" I smiled. Revenge needs witnesses. Rebirth needs no one's permission. She leaned in. So what would you say to someone who's still waiting to be seen? I paused. Stop waiting. You're not invisible. You're being underestimated. And that's your power. It aired to millions. The clip went viral. Young women quoted me. Business leaders reposted it. And for the first time in a long time, I saw myself not as the woman who was erased, but as the woman who made being underestimated a tactical advantage. Damon had once silenced me with ego. Angela had tried to steal my light. But now I didn't burn. I illuminated. Quietly. Constantly. And no one could dim me again. I created a scholarship in my mother's name for young women entering business. At the ceremony, a teenage girl hugged me and whispered, I didn't think people like us were allowed to take up space. I looked her in the eye. Not only are we allowed, we belong. She nodded. That was the moment I'd been waiting for. Not Damon's apology, not Angela's downfall. But this, seeing someone else stand taller because I had stood first. And that's when I knew the rebirth was complete. It didn't end in revenge. It ended in replication, in transformation, in legacy. My story had moved past me, and that was the most beautiful ending I could have asked for. The 10th anniversary of the company I built was quiet, by design. No stage, no lights, just the team that had grown beside me. We gathered in the conference room that used to be run by men who mocked our silence. Now it was filled with women who had rewritten the rules. One by one, they raised glasses and shared what being part of the journey meant. Not one mentioned the betrayal that started it all, because it didn't matter anymore. That wasn't our story. The true story was what we'd created from the rubble. A global movement, a brand built on integrity, a space where no one had to beg to be believed. That night, I looked around and realized I had done what Damon never could. I didn't just save a company. I built a future, one that didn't need saving ever again. Lucas and I sat on the balcony afterward, watching the city pulse below. He held my hand in silence. I used to think power was about being the loudest in the room, I said. But it's not. No, he asked. It's about being the one who doesn't flinch when the spotlight turns off. He nodded. And you? You shine without it. I leaned my head on his shoulder. He never asked to be the center of my story. That's why he stayed in it. For the first time in my life, I loved someone who didn't need my silence to feel strong. And that love didn't burn me. It warmed me. I wasn't rebuilding alone anymore. I was choosing who got to stand beside me, not because I needed them, but because they showed up without asking me to dim. One morning, I found an email from a college professor who had added my story to his business ethics syllabus. You're not just a case study, he wrote. You're a turning point. I stared at the screen, stunned. I had spent so long trying not to disappear that it never occurred to me I'd become a blueprint for how others found themselves. That's what Betrayal had given me. Not just fire, but focus. Not just rage, but reach. I replied simply, thank you. I hope they learn that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one they tried to ignore. Months later, I walked past a bookstore and saw The Second Save in the window, bestseller sticker in the corner. A woman walked out holding a copy, flipping pages. I caught a glimpse of the line she'd highlighted. Sometimes the real betrayal isn't when they erase your name. It's when you start believing they were right to. I paused. That sentence had poured out of me one sleepless night, heart racing. And now, someone else held it like armor. That was more valuable than any award. The version of me who once stayed quiet out of love would have cried. This version? She smiled. She knew the difference between pain and power, and how sometimes they live side by side until you're strong enough to separate them. I heard Damon had remarried, someone younger, quieter, a woman who, people whispered, reminded them of me. I hoped she was nothing like me. I hoped she was listened to, respected, protected. But I didn't check. I didn't stalk profiles or ask mutuals for updates. Because Damon no longer lived in my timeline. He was a character in a finished chapter, and I had closed the book. The worst part of Betrayal isn't the breaking, it's the rebuilding. But I'd done it, not to prove a point, to prove I was still here, still whole, still building. The final piece wasn't revenge. It was peace. And once I had that, I didn't care who missed the ending. Because it wasn't for them. It was mine. Angela tried another rebrand, new name, new platform. It fizzled out like the rest. Not because people didn't forgive, but because they'd seen who she was when no one was watching. Character isn't crafted in public. It's exposed in silence. And hers had already spoken volumes. Meanwhile, mine was printed, posted, and passed down. I didn't chase applause. I chased alignment. And it led me exactly where I was meant to be, not back in the same room begging for recognition, but in new rooms where I was the recognition. No mistress could ever take that from me again. No man could hide me in his shadow. And no empire would ever be built with my hands and someone else's name again. Years later, I was asked to deliver a commencement speech. I stood at that podium, older, wiser, calm. They will underestimate you, I said, and they will steal from you, smile at you while doing it. But don't burn for them. Don't fight to be seen. Be undeniable. Let your success become the silence they choke on. Let your strength say what your words never had to. The crowd rose. Cameras flashed. But I didn't smile for the attention. I smiled for the girl I used to be. The one who once asked herself, why doesn't he value me? Now I knew the answer. He didn't have the capacity to. And I had finally stopped handing him access to the things he never earned. Lucas proposed on a quiet Sunday morning. No spectacle, no cameras, just him kneeling in our kitchen, holding a ring and saying, I don't want to fix you. I want to build with you. I said yes, not because I needed a new beginning, but because I'd already given myself one. This was just a beautiful addition. Our wedding was small. My vows simple. You never asked me to choose between being loved and being powerful. So I get to be both now. And that, more than anything, sealed the second life I'd built, not defined by trauma, but by truth. The last time I saw Damon was at a charity event. He walked in late, sat in the back, said nothing. Our eyes met briefly. He gave a weak smile. I gave a polite nod. That was it. No confrontation. No rehashing. Just the quiet acknowledgement between two people who used to share everything, and now shared nothing. I didn't hate him. I didn't miss him. I just didn't see him anymore. And that, I realized, was the final closure. When they fade not because you're angry, but because they no longer exist in the world you've created. And so here I am, reborn. Not in fire, but in silence. Not in screaming vengeance, but in quiet refusal. I saved his company. I exposed his mistress. And when he came crawling back, furious I wouldn't save him again, I smiled. Because I finally knew I was never his safety net. I was the foundation he kept burning. And now, I had rebuilt without him. Stronger, smarter, untouchable. He chose to fall. I chose to rise. And rise I did, on my own terms.